All
Good
right.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining AARP Louisiana's Zoom presentation on downsizing and decluttering. I think you're going to enjoy this presentation. I've given it a few times. We're going to tweak it a little bit. So, so again, I thank you for coming today. By the way, I'm Gary Calligas, and I am one of the executive council members for AARP Louisiana, and I represent the northern part of the state of Louisiana. Been doing this for the past 4.5 years. I'll enjoy making presentations, enjoy making live presentations more than I do Zoom, but I've done a lot of Zoom presentations. I really enjoy doing this. In addition, though I'm 71, I'm not retired. A lot of people say, God, Gary, you should have retired at 65. No, I don't want to retire for a while. I'm currently a publisher of a magazine, a senior boomer magazine called The Best of Times in Northwest Louisiana. And also I talk a lot. So I'm a radio show host of a weekly radio show that airs every Saturday morning for the past 21 years and talking about senior and boomer issues. So I really enjoy spreading the knowledge and being the facilitator of knowledge. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. In addition, for you, those of you may not know me, I've got a lot of interesting backgrounds. I'm a former home health care administrator. I used to work for the Medicare program for like 12 years at a young age. So I have a good feeling for Medicare and Medicaid. And in addition to all of that, I'm a former engineer. So you never know what you want to be when you grow up. For the past 21 years, I've been a publisher, radio show host, and presenter of presentations to senior groups throughout the United States, but mainly in Louisiana. So again, I welcome you today. I hope that you're going to enjoy this presentation. We have muted you, but we want you to give us input via the chat. And then after the end of this presentation, it won't last that long, that we will be able to address your questions and allow you to make comments, as we always glean a lot of new information and items from our individual participants today. So in prior sessions what we've done, so we welcome those comments, but we're not going to stop and chit chat. Gary's going to give you a lot of information and hopefully you can take some of these back to you as well as to implement for you and your family as well. So again, let's take it away, Jessica. Hope everybody knows or recognizes this particular figure. This is, of course, King Tut. And we're going to talk a little bit about him. But I don't know if you know this, but about a year and a half ago, maybe more than that, they moved King Tut and all of his treasures to a new location in Cairo. And it was a big, remarkable presentation. So we're going to talk about him and how he is involved in our decluttering and downsizing issue. Next slide. So our agenda today is going to help you gain an understanding of why stuff is so important. And we're going to learn some practical and easy to follow downsizing and decluttering tips. So another caveat I want to mention is Gary's been there and done that. Hopefully you have as well. Decluttering and downsizing is a continuing process. And at 71, I've done it for many years for my family members, for the past 2.5 years, extensively for my wife and I. And I've learned a lot. In addition, because I am a writer and a publisher, I've written several feature articles that have been in Gannett newspapers throughout the United States about senior issues, but one specifically about decluttering and downsizing. And it got some interesting reviews, and also did a couple of radio shows about it as well. So that's the other interesting item. The interesting aspect that I want to mention is during COVID period of time, I think more and more people did a little bit of downsizing and decluttering, and hopefully it's going to be continuing, but it's an ongoing process, and we're going to learn about that today. Next slide. Well, as you see in our demographic here, the fastest growing demographic, of course, is older Americans, and persons 65 years of age or older represents, it's going to be quite a few millions in the year 2040. And of course, 2020, it's increasing each and every year. And this is a according to estimates, 33% of Americans will be over 65 in 40 years. Wow, that's going to be remarkable. So we're of course the largest and most powerful buying group in America. We buy lots of stuff and we accumulate lots of stuff. Next slide. So interestingly enough, this may be the last time that we'll have 4 generations still alive at the same time. Wow. The silent generation, of course, the baby boomers like me, Gen X, and the millennials. So it's an interesting aspect because these 2 oldest generations, the silent and the baby, want to pass down some of their stuff to the younger 2 generations. Well, there's the particular problem. Occasionally, there are going to be some issues regarding theirs. And so that's going to be one of our aspects of the presentation today is, do they really want this? And why, and why is this stuff and why is this information an important matter to us? Next slide, Jessica. So why does it all matter? Because, of course, as it says, the largest amount of people ever requiring healthcare are boomers and their parents. And I want to add a little aspect, as it says at the bottom. Being a home healthcare administrator, I can tell you many times where my nurses and staff try to enter people's homes to give them needed care. And it was quite difficult because they had stuff accumulated all over the house, around the bedroom where the patient was in needing that particular care. And it really impeded her getting, I would say, proper quality care. Most of the time, our nurses and staff came back to us and says, Gary, my director of nursing and I were in conference. We need to take the following action. We need to get the following family members to come there to help sort and declutter, because it is a safety hazard for our caregivers as well as the family person that is there. So it is a critical matter that this decluttering and possibly downsizing be taken care of. The other thing that everybody needs to be aware of, if you haven't been there, done that, is those 2 generations attach a lot of pride to the stuff. My parents, my grandparents had a lot of pride, and they had a lot of memories, and they worked hard, and they had to spend a lot of money for some of this stuff as well. The other reason why we think all this matters is because there is a shortage, continuing to be a shortage of affordable housing. So that's another reason for downsizing, and you don't need the big room for a big home for one person that can have 12,000 square feet. Hopefully it can be for a larger family, et cetera. And of course, as we mentioned, the rising cost of healthcare, more services provided within the home. So everything's more coming back to the home as much as possible. And as I mentioned, is that stuff in the home does impede the quality of care. Again, fire hazards, tripping hazards, access to the bathroom, et cetera. And so we're seeing more of that. I talked to my fellow home healthcare administrators in the area, and they're saying they still have the problem. Gary, we got to get the people to have better access to their homes when they're provided needed care there as well. So that's the other reason why we feel that it's very important regarding decluttering the home for you, yourself, but also your loved ones as well. Next slide. So this 2017 National Care Survey said the majority of caretakers said handling the stuff of that person was the most stressful part of settling an estate. I can attest to that. I'm an only child, so I had to take care of it for my parents, but also for 5 other relatives that didn't have any family members, did not have any children. It was tremendously stressful. And if you've never been there or done that, it is the most stressful situation of decluttering and handling the estate, but handling all the particular items is tremendously difficult as well. Next slide. So here's the big notice. If you've never had this told you, no one really wants your stuff, sadly. Again, I'll mention that again. No one really wants our stuff, your stuff. And that is definitely true in most senses. I will put a caveat, and hopefully we're going to tell you some tips today that maybe family members and others might want some of your stuff. But in the long run, hopefully some of the kids, some of your grandkids, some of your relatives, some of your friends, and some people you don't even know might make use of your stuff. Next slide. So let's look at some of the tips for downsizing and decluttering. Next slide. Helpful hints. Include everyone in the house in this particular aspect of decluttering, definitely decluttering. It says, I love this one, husbands, kids, and everyone. Is anybody concerned? When I saw the word husbands, when I got this slide, I said, who came up with this? So some of us have more than one husbands that are going to come to our house to help us declutter. I thought that was an interesting statement made. I think it's a typo. Hopefully one husband and one spouse will do it, but you might want to invite the exes, but I don't think that's going to be the greatest thing ever possible. So we suggest, and I've been there, done that. You get as many people, family members and other ones involved. It's going to help the situation, especially if you are needing of assistance, and sometimes in making those executive decisions on what to do with the stuff. So it's important. I strongly believe that involving more of the kids and grandkids, it doesn't even say kids, but I think the kids and grandkids and other family members is important in this particular process. Next slide. Here's the thing that I implemented, and hopefully you'll implement, is it's a monumental task, especially if a loved one passes away and you must have to decide what to do with all of the stuff. Wow. The best thing to do, even if you're living in the home now, my wife and I have done this several times the past 3 years, is do the 10-minute sweep. That is, take a room, go through this area, but have a small area to look at, and don't think about it overwhelmingly. Take one little step at a time. Take that sweep, say, I'm going to do this 2 by 2 foot section of clothing, of items, etc., of toolboxes, etc. It works. It's like when you want to make that goal of, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Well, you're not going to lose 50 pounds immediately, most of the time. You're going to take it in steps. You're going to lose a few pounds here, 1 pound there, 2 pounds there by doing things. So it's a similar thing. Is you might try to do it, that doing that little 10-minute sweep first, and then tackling that particular area, and then moving on either the next day, the next few hours, etc. It does work. The other interesting thing about the 10-minute sweep, which I found when I invited my kids, I haven't invited my grandkids, they're too young, but I invited my kids that were in town when my wife and I were doing some sweeps, is that you can tell some stories about the stuff. And we'll talk about that later, is telling the stories about the photos, the trophies, the portrait, the painting, the clocks, etc. Sometimes going to put some meaning to those particular items and help you make some decisions with them about what to do with the stuff. Next slide. I thought this was an interesting one. Number 3, listen to this one, is so when people come back from a trip to visit kids, grandkids, or a vacation, I thought it's interestingly enough, is they bring their bags, back home. And so when you ask someone, what do you do? Well, a lot of them say, I just leave the bags there to our next trip to visit our grandkids and don't even worry about unpacking it. Well, we highly recommend that you consider unpacking the bags, just like when you bring home the grocery bags and items that you buy at Target or Home Depot or Office Depot, etc., that you unpack it and put them in their right place. It's the same thing with suitcases galore. So, it's sad, but there are people that stack suitcases full of items and probably don't even unpack them until much later. So it accumulates stuff, accumulates more things, and possibly you won't even find the item that you may be looking for. But I do know of people, I know of two individuals I visited just last week, and they still had their suitcases in their bedroom that just got back from a trip. And I just had to ask, so where are you planning a next trip? Oh, next year. And I looked at both suitcases and I said, oh, that's interesting. Next year, the bags are still there. So we sadly suggest unpack the bag immediately, just like you're putting up your grocery bags. Next slide. So this is a real critical one. Being a former engineer, and I think a very organized person in my life, even now, today at 71, stuff has a home. Every item has a location, whether it's tools, whether it's items in the kitchen, whether it's pots and pans, everything, clothes in your closet, everything has a rule. So just like when you bring those groceries home, you need to put them up. You don't need to put them in scattered locations throughout the house, but you're going to forget where they are as well. So the other thing is when you bring stuff home and you just stack them up, I've been to people's homes where they keep stacking things up and never being able to find the new item that they might have bought at Walmart or Target, whatever. So put everything where it's supposed to go, so at least you make use of it and have it easily accessible and known to others. If you hide it, nobody's going to know where it is. Your wife or your kids may buy you additional particular items that you'll have more stuff to decide upon. The other thing is, I love tools and I tend to buy lots of tools. My wife tells me I buy too many tools, but I generally make the philosophy when I buy a new tool, the old tool either is broken, doesn't work. So I do the adage of equal in, equal out. Hopefully it's better when I buy the new stuff, but the new item might be a better tool, a better screwdriver, a better drill. So either I dispose of it, get rid of it, donate it if it works to somebody else. So I don't have so much additional stuff that I don't have like 97 different power drills in my home or 14 different lawnmowers. Like I went to one of my friend's house a few days ago. He must have had 7 lawnmowers in his garage, taking him up lots of, I think, unnecessary space because both his cars could get into the garage. He can only put one, but the other one was all full of different lawnmowers. And I had to ask him, I said, Bill, how often do you use all these lawnmowers? He says, well, no, I just use the first one there. It's my riding lawnmower. It's my deluxe one. But he has all the other ones in case the riding lawnmower dies as a contingency. But I don't think he needs 7 backups. But, some people are that way. But it's accumulating stuff. And likewise, the clothing needs to go in the closet, the towels, etc. So everything does have a particular home. And so I do give you the motto, it's going to help you in decluttering, is the equal in and equal out. If you buy, luckily my wife has been doing that lately with shoes. I know ladies love a lot of shoes and guys aren't that way generally. So, when she's buying some new shoes, she has been considering for the past few years, she's been donating to Goodwill and other sources the other shoes that, several, she brings in one, she sometimes donates 2 or 3 pairs. So it's been helping, and we've had that philosophy for the past few years. Next slide. So this is the important one, the most difficult one. In all my dealings of downsizing and decluttering, this is the one that requires the most, and it is the most difficult thing to do. I challenge each and every one of you is to think real hard. So you do the 4-pile sort in that small area. Remember, I didn't tell you to do the whole house. I said to go that area. So you're going to make that go to that particular area, and you're going to say, do I keep this? Do I sell this locally at a yard sale, rummage sale, or do I sell it in consignment places, or to put them on Facebook or apps or eBay or whatever? The last item, do I donate it? And is it just totally junk, totally unrepairable? Nobody's ever going to want it. And that's, I would say, a very difficult one. And so when you have your significant other with you, and you might have other kids and so forth, they might help you make the executive decisions on the sell, the keep, the donate, the trash, whatever. But I'm telling you, it's difficult. So the other suggestion, which I've done, you put those items that you want to keep far away. So you have to have that extra energy to pick up that particular clock or trophy or something. I really want this. This is a really interesting, important historical item in our family. And you take it and you move it to a certain area of that particular room for all the keeping items. Well, it makes you stop and think, do I really want this or not? It gives you an opportunity to make second thoughts. My wife and I did the second opinion. So we would both come up with the idea of keep, we'd keep. If we say keep, sell, or the other option, we'd have to have a little discussion about it. But the most important thing that I think I did when in all this, and I strongly suggest, I think I talked about it earlier, is some of these keep items and some of these sell items and some of these donate items, and even some of the trash items, sadly, they shouldn't be the ones you talk about, all have stories. And so when I had my wife there, even my kids there, we talked about some of these items. And it's important because you're going to be utilizing these when we talk about the next particular item, about the donating, donating to your family, donating to your friends. If you can tell them a story about that particular item, they might feel that it's important to the family that this be passed down from generation to generation. But selling, we're going to talk about that a little bit, it's difficult to sell things. Don't expect you're going to get bottom dollar for anything you have. I mean, it's remarkable. I got to quickly tell you about one of the items that my wife and I had for many years was a specially ordered brass bed that I gave to my wife as a anniversary present after we were married some 20 years. We're now married 47. I got her dream of the most elaborate brass bed known to man. Couldn't find it locally. I went to a shop in Pennsylvania to make it custom made for her and shipped to Shreveport, Louisiana. We got it. She loved it. I mean, it was like the most inspiring thing. It was a big show and tell. It was massive. It was so heavy, it took 4 people to bring in the freight inside to assemble it into our master bedroom. And it was something we kept for, up until 2 years ago. Sadly, after we moved into our new home a few years ago, she didn't want to bring that. She wanted all contemporary furniture. So she said, store it. The kids will want it. The grandkids will want it. Somebody will want it. And it's a very expensive, very elaborate brass bed. Well, to come to make it short, none of the kids wanted it. None of the family members wanted it, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, we'll try to sell it. Well, we couldn't even sell it. I even feel bad about selling it. So we ended up donating it to a family in our area, a newlywed family that got a small little home and had a very nice bedroom. We found out about them and we donated that as well as all the other items of furniture that we had in our bedroom to this particular family. I could not tell you how much thankful they were and their family members and their 2 kids that they got this particular item. So it made us happy, made them happy, and all the family members were elated that we found somebody that would take care of this particular item. So you never know, but the stories. So next slide. This is one thing, if you've never thought about, I highly recommend you consider doing. Most of us think in our last will and testimonies that you can have bequests and legacies. I'm going to pass this down to my grandson, my son, my daughter, my sister, my brother. However, we suggest, I've done it, is you do it now. You're going to see the joy. You're going to tell them the story. You're going to give that particular shotgun that was passed down by your great-great-grandfather to you now, to your grandson that loves hunting, that loves that, and now knows the rest of the story about that particular shotgun? Or are you going to pass down that particular uh, mantle clock that I passed down to my son now that he loves, that was passed down in my family for like 2 generations? So it's like remarkable when you'll see them. Sometimes when you say, I want to give this to them, they're going to say, I don't want it. Well, that makes it even easier for your bequest in your will that I'll find somebody else that might want it, some other family member. So, so that's one way that you can distribute these items to loved ones, even friends, and not even family members that might need them now that you're not making use of them right now, or they're just, hate to say this, taking up room. They're cluttering. You want to downsize, you want to declutter. They're good stuff, but maybe they might want to make use of these particular items. And it's going to empty your home faster. And it's also going to help you easier once you pass, and your executor is going to have not to make that executive decisions about who to give it to. It's remarkable. The other thing I want to caution you about, because this happened to two of my best friends. They did end up doing this. I recommended this particular topic several years ago, and I knew about it. I knew these individuals gave a particular item, which was a shotgun, to a grandson. However, the gentleman and his wife forgot to review his last will and testimony. And guess what? In the last will and testimony, his shotgun was bequeathed to another grandson. So what happened, I got the rest of the story from the grandson who got the shotgun, is there was an argument between the two grandsons on who should get the shotgun, because the father had given it to another grandson before he passed. Interesting scenario. It could happen. So just be careful if you bequeath things before, make sure they're not in your bequest in your legal documents. You need to take them out and revise your will, which can be done quite easily. So be very careful about that. And the other thing about these legacies that I mentioned, I emphasize this because anything I've given to my kids, I haven't given a lot to my grandkids, they're all oldest is 7, but is I write down the stories and make it more personal to them. So they don't have to feel that they know a little bit about that particular clock. They know a little bit about that particular item that my ancestors gave me. That we're Greek Orthodox, the icons that I got from my great-great-grandparents from Romania, from Greece, from Istanbul, from Constantinople, from Kefalonia, Greece, that were brought into the country, brought into the United States of America. I've written down all the stories about them, and some of them are totally remarkable. And hopefully all of my kids and grandkids will keep passing those down from generation to generation. So, again, I caution you, I think it's a great thing if you have never thought about doing it, but giving away now is going to avoid a lot of stress later on, and it's going to save you a lot of room in that area. So, it's going to be important. The other thing, as I mentioned, if they say they don't want it, at least and before later on, you might have had it in your last will that they're not going to really want it. So where's it going to go to then? It might go into another family member that really wants it. Next slide. Okay, does everybody know what punting means? And that's what happened to my father, my grandparents. They punted a lot of their items and stuff and furniture to me and other family members, but primarily to me. We had a storage space outside of our home, over 3,000 square feet that we rented for 20 years, that stored every bit of furniture from a lot of my relatives, my parents, distant relatives and cousins that didn't know where else to put them and didn't want to sell them, give away, or donate. So they said, Gary and Tina will store those in their storeroom, and hopefully someday in the future, some of the family members will come and get them. Well, I will tell you that in 20 years, that storeroom was completely full. We couldn't even hardly open the door. So Tina and I decided we're going to unpunt all these items. We called a lot of relatives and told them, you need to come here. If you want any items, take them, because we're not going to keep them anymore. We're going to give them away and declutter over 2,000 square feet and mucho thousands of dollars that we have spent storing all these items for over 20 something years. So it was the best thing we ever did. I give credit to my wife for thinking about doing that. I never thought about it because I hardly ever went to the storage room, and probably once every year we would go there. So again, that's going to require now our kids and grandkids don't want us to punt to them. So you're going to have to worry, because they're not easily going to accept them as we did in those olden days. Those seniors and boomers in that particular item, we accepted a lot of that because we felt guilty. You know, my parents had all these particular World War II collective items and items that he was on a merchant ship. I mean, we've saved a few of these times, but recently we've given them away or donated them or sold them to people. So, I mean, right now, these kids really don't want the stuff. And it's important, though, if you're going to punt, I still think you don't say, James, here's a portrait, here's a painting on the wall that we want you to have. He's probably going to say, or his wife's going to say, we don't want that, it doesn't decor. But if you tell them the rest of the story about it, about how it was commissioned, how it was done, how old it is, etc., there's stories about every particular item in your home and how you got that stuff. And some of them are going to be remarkable. I mean, we got some interesting items that I'm going to be bestowing upon my kids from the country of China that Tina and I were fortunate enough to visit. I mean, I think all of my kids are going to want it. So it's like, wow, it's like a wow moment when you tell them the rest of the story. If they just look at it, they probably wouldn't think it's a wow moment. But if you give them the rest of the story, they're going to definitely think, man, I will keep that and pass it down from generation to generation. Next slide. Number 8 suggestion, donate, donate, donate. Yes, if you all else succeed, donate. There are people out there at your church, your organization. There's so many organizations out there that can get it to the right people. Individuals, you might know of those individuals that you might want to make a private donation to those individuals as well. So it's important that you consider donating those items, and hopefully those items are in good shape, but you don't have use of it. Your family members don't want it, but somebody, as I told you, that particular brass bed has made one young family just like beaming. I've never seen so much beam in my whole life when we both gave it to both of them, that they were so appreciative. And I mean, they couldn't express it so many words or less. So donating is the easy way. There's so many organizations. And the other thing is, and I highly recommend, people say, well, I don't want a donation. I don't want a taxable donation. Well, why not? If you itemize your deductions, and I believe in some senses don't itemize, you can get get those receipts and get something back for the particular market value of those particular items. There's no harm in asking. When you donate to Goodwill and all of those others, they're going to give you a receipt slip that you can determine the value based upon the thrift value, whatever, and get some benefit back on your federal, state, and city taxes as well. So, but there's so many organizations out there that will gladly accept your items. So make use of them. And of course, I would always say, ask family, friends, church members first, and then go to those particular organizations, because I'm sure they're more than glad they're willing to accept those. Next slide. I love this one. Be realistic about clothing. This was my closet that you're looking at right there. I'm currently a size 36 and trying to go back to my 30-inch waist, but it's going to be a mission impossible, never going to happen. So several years ago, myself, and I'm sure many others have thought the same thing, your closet's jam-packed with clothes that you'll never go back to those particular sizes. So that's the important thing you do. You just go through all your clothes. You're never, when we went through mine a few years ago with my wife, she said, Gary, 30 you're never going to be at 30. You've got 6+ inches to go to lose all that weight. And I'm struggling to keep the 36 there all the time. So, clothing is the realistic thing. So, especially if they're not fitting, a man's closet, a woman's closet, I mean, take those items, give them to somebody. Most of mine were hardly worn. So when we gave and donated it to the various organizations, they were like thankful about that. The other aspects of clothing is, do you really need that many pairs? Sometimes we have so many we hardly even wear them. So think about it. And so the many nonprofits take it and give it to clients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So clothing is especially one that you might be a realistic about. Why should I keep that suit, that leisure suit that I had back in the 70s or 80s? Some people will say, well, maybe I'll wear it to a costume party, but that's not going to happen too often. So again, some of that nostalgia stuff might be good, might be coming back, but no. Likewise, food. I go to various people's food pantries that they're saving up, especially my parents and grandparents' age. They have food in there that probably had canned goods 30 or 40 years old. You got to be real careful about saving those items that they're expired and maybe spoil and maybe detrimental to your health. So, consider going through all your food items and doing that kind of decluttering as well. Likewise, toys, et cetera, that you might have. We're talking about tons of different items that you might think of decluttering and getting out of your house. Next slide. This is the most difficult one. Wow, I'm telling you, this took us the most time, because in that particular storeroom that I told you, I had all tax returns for all my relatives for the past umpteen years. There were boxes stacked to the ceiling of all these papers that I don't know why I was told I had to keep them, but I was told by predecessors I had to keep all these particular documents. And, it was a nightmare going through all of them. It was an eye-opening experience of looking at some of them. You never know what people might store inside of file boxes. So that's the most difficult thing for you to do, is shredding them, finding a shredder, bringing the documents to be shredded, bills, checks, tax returns, legal documents. I mean, going through all that with my wife and I, even out of our own house, took us a long period of time, because she would be do we need this? Is this required if we sell any property, et cetera, et cetera? Well, a lot of things you have to keep around. You might file them with the clerk of court, et cetera, but sometimes you have the original documents. So you've got to be real careful about sometimes shredding these particular important documents. And so that's going to be the most difficult thing. And paper is really tough. Mail, I hate to give you some true examples about this one, but my parents and my grandparents saved a lot of their love letters and a lot of their mail that they sent back and forth during World War II. And I was bestower of that information as well for several of my relatives. And, it was sad for me to have to destroy these, but what are you going to do with boxes and boxes of mail? I mean, even the stamps were weird back then. There were very few had stamps. Most of them were government mail service, but you learned a lot. I mean, I opened a bunch of the letters and read through. I had tears in some of them. But, do you open up all of them for all the family members? It's very difficult to decide, but we made the executive decision. We saved a few, and hopefully my kids and grandkids will like to pass those down from generation to generation. But it was the most difficult thing to do, the mail. The next difficult thing was photos. Wow, did we have a lot of photos? And all my family members had a lot of photos. And back then, we didn't have digital photos, so we had to print all those photos. We had all those negatives. We had boxes and boxes of photos and negatives. So what we suggest in photos is that you either scan them on your computer, which you can do, but it takes a long time. And likewise, if you have movies, my father loved his back in the 40s, had a Super 8 millimeter movie. He took probably 300 different movies at the 25-foot reels. I don't know if all of you remember those. So luckily we found somebody to translate all those, put them all together and load them onto DVDs. They are remarkable. Some of them are poor quality, but a lot of them are great quality. And surprisingly, later on when I got one with sound. So we loaded all those onto sound, and now we have everything digitized all into a hard drive that I've given all to my kids and other family members. They've got all these particular files that are going to last forever. While the photos might going to be dissolved in a few years, most of them have been. So digitizing photos, videos, etc., slides, it can be a great space saver and help you eliminate those particular photos and negatives. The other thing, though, a lot of my family members, I hope you do this, is before they passed and when I would go visit them, I would go through their stack of photos or their photo albums and told them and asked them, write the names of the people on this and tell me the story about your trip to Galveston, Texas, or your trip to New York City to go to the Empire State Building, or your cruise to the Bahamas, or your cruise to Europe. And luckily, I got a lot of my relatives to do that. And of course, those are the photos and those are the captions that I saved. And those are the ones that I'm going to be giving to my kids and grandkids. And I've already showed it to them. So it's important. So again, getting those loved ones now yourself to write down on some of these key photos that you only have one of a kind is important. In that, I hate to say that word punting, but when you say, son or daughter, I want you to keep some of these photos so you can remember great Aunt Jessie or great Uncle Bill, him doing this, or him being in that race, or that him racing that horses at the Downs, or et cetera, or that particular moment, or he making a presentation at a congressional banquet, or being with President John F. Kennedy, et cetera. Those particular photos, why were you with John F. Kennedy? Why was he? He's going to tell you the rest of the story. I mean, I've got some of those photos. I've got some of those things that I'm jotting down for my kids and grandkids, so they'll know the rest of the story. Dad, where were you with Vice President Dan Quayle? And I told him, it's a long story. And I had the opportunity to meet with him an extensive time, and that wasn't in Washington, D.C., that was in Chicago. So it's a great story, and my kids were fascinated when I told it to them. They all said, Dad, write that down and videotape that, because that is totally remarkable. It is an interesting story. Don't have time to tell you, it could take about 30 minutes. So again, get those photos, write those captions, tell those people, and tell the situation where it occurred. It's going to make your time and effort in sorting those particular stories. The other item, of course, paper. Wow, it is really difficult. I'm telling you, when we went through some of I've been involved in so many businesses, so many operations, so many nonprofits, and I hate to say this, I was a secretary of a lot of these, and I was the depository of all these different files. Well, trying to get a hold of those individuals, should we keep or not keep? A lot of times I made the executive decision, and if they're 25, 30, or 40 years old and you're never going to have to worry about them, shred them, take care of them. So we, at one point in time, I think we took 27 different legal boxes to be shredded. That was one occasion. And luckily the shredding company came to us, shredded them, and it was much better than me having to take. Well, hopefully, AERP occasionally does shredding events throughout the United States in various locations. Hopefully we'll get back to that in the very near future. But one thing was left off of this helpful hints in paring down paper and photos. And I think it was another critical one, is think about all the books, think about all the magazines, think about all the newspapers, think about all the 8-track cassette players, the cassette decks, the records, the VHS tapes, the DVDs, that all you have, that can be overbearing. But I caution you about books. When we went several years ago, my wife and I said, Gary, because we had stored these, I can't remember, we stored them in the storage room. I don't think, yeah, we did. We had 12 sets of Encyclopedia Britannicas for all our kids, and were handed down to us by our family members. 12 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica, World Book, and all the, you're talking about a lot of space and heavy. But did you know that there are organizations throughout the world that would love to have those documents and have those books? In your area, contact, there are different various book locations that will love donations of encyclopedias, of course, books, hard books, and even paperback books, and 8-tracks and cassettes, etc. But they were especially thrilled that we had complete sets of these encyclopedias. And what they do with them, I'm sure a lot of times they resell them, but a lot of times they keep them. And it's amazing how much space that your house will have and your storage room will have when you get rid of that many. Now, one of my recent grandkids, I kept one set, and I showed her this, she's 7 years old. I showed her the encyclopedia, I think it's World Book, that we kept, one of the World Book ones, and all the subsequent volumes. And she was amazed that, and of course, what was there out of her mind? This is just like Google in print. I said, yep, that's what it is, Google in print, because it has all the information. She was flipping through different subject topics. Wow, Dad, that's about Prince Philip and about the different presidents. Wow. And, and she said, well, I just go online and Google that and it comes up with information. I said, yeah, this is in printed form. You don't have to print it from the internet. This is what we had. We didn't have that luxury back then in the 70s, 60s, 80s, and 50s. So this is what we had. And this was a great tool that all of us did our research papers, et cetera. So, and one more thing I want to talk about, I know we've gone a little bit over time, is think about these, about collectibles. There are several, we're going to give you some handouts, but watch about collectibles. You don't know sometimes what's valuable and what not valuable until you do a little research. So there are many things that are collectibles that you sometimes don't want to immediately give away or toss. Good example. I hate to bring, my mother passed away many years ago. I love her dearly, but she did a start of downsizing and decluttering after I left the home. That was many years ago. She said, son, and she told me this, but I didn't catch the connection. She said, you've been collecting baseball cards for the past, since you were like 5 years old. So when I was 20 something years old and I left, had my own, 23 years old when I left the home to get my own home and had my own job, my mother said, you don't want those baseball cards, so I'm going to give them away to the kids who are on the block. She ended up giving my entire baseball card collection to various kids throughout the neighborhood. And the kids were like, Miss Calligas, you're the best, this is the best Christmas present. And it wasn't even Christmas that I ever had. I heard back from her. She said, Gary, they were so touched. Well, guess what she gave away? Roger Maris card, a Mickey Mantle card, and several cards that were probably worth today a couple $100,000. Hopefully those family members know that they got these cards and passed them down and didn't throw them away and chunk them. But there were several extremely valuable cards that, it happens, but be foreclosed. Recently, I was a collector of junk too. When I was growing up with young kids, we collected Beanie Babies for my only daughter. Hopefully everybody remembers, they're still around, I believe. But when they first came out, they were a big hit. So I traveled the world and found unusual Beanie Babies for my daughter and brought them home. Luckily, we've kept all of those. And we're about to give it to her now, eventually, to her and her kids. But we've kept all of them, and they're all in pristine condition. And many of them are worth $4,000 to $5,000. I was shocked when we looked them up online, $4,000 to $5,000 each. It's totally amazing. I only spent like $5 on the guys back in the 70s, and now they're worth that much because they're extremely rare. So be very careful when you're going through this downsizing and decluttering that you look at those particular items. One other aspect before we close is look in the attic. We fail to do that. Not looking in the attic, not looking in other locations, lake homes, fishing camps, rental property, of course, in your garage and carports, even your car might need decluttering. So in conclusion, we said you can't take it with you. And on your facing it on the left is King Tut's items that he had in his tomb. He didn't take them with him, but it's probably now in some storage facility at his new location in Cairo, Egypt. And that's our stuff. You know, somebody hopefully make use of that stuff now, but back then, maybe not. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you gained some ideas to help you implement decluttering and downsizing your particular areas. We're also going to give you some resources. Is that right, Troy?
That is correct. You should have received some resources via email. I sent it over to you. So please make sure that you take a look and utilize those resources. And definitely, you know, I put the contact information for myself and Gary. Be on the lookout as well for an email from me, because we want to continue these types of virtual events, sharing it with our members and non-members and friends. There's going to be a survey that I'm going to put in the chat here shortly, but I'm also going to send it to your email. Please fill that out, give us your feedback, because we want to continue these types of virtual events as we move forward. But I'm happy everyone was here, and there's some great comments here in the chat that looks fantastic. And you know, there's a question here from Sandra, Gary, and she asked, where can you donate like these encyclopedias? Where can you donate? Is it Goodwill, or what other places can you do that?
Goodwill, but certain universities have book fairs. I can tell you the one in Shreveport and Bossier City area has Centenary College, and they have once a year a book festival, and they love getting donations of all books, including encyclopedias. And several years ago when we decluttered, we gave all of our 12, or how many of them were, encyclopedias, and I loaded them all in my cars and loaded them to them, and they were so thankful. And I'm sure they ended up selling them to someone or donating them to someone as well. But they're probably somebody you can probably, I hate to say this, Google it and find out locally who in the area. There's a lot of used bookstores that will more than glad donate and sometimes even pay you for certain books as well.
Awesome, Gary. Awesome. There's another question about, you know, we talked about the 10 most helpful tips. My question would be to you, Gary, would be, of all those 10 most helpful tips, what is the most impactful that you have found that would be, you know, really, that's one of the top thing that you can do to really downsize and declutter, Gary?
Well, I found the most rewarding is to donate. I've sometimes donated to friends and church members and people that I hear that might have need of particular furniture, particular items. It made me feel tremendous. I mean, we've donated lots of different furniture to our housekeepers, to our neighbors, friends, etc. It made a purpose at that item. And I mean, I hate to say this, one individual that we donated like 3 couches to called us like 3 months later, you got to come to our house. And so we went to their house and they showed us and how wonderful their kids loved these particular couches and how it made them a home, and they had some terrible ones before. They showed some pictures of it, and I said, I'm more than glad to help. And they said they really couldn't afford the several $1,000s to get three remarkable, and they were in great shape couches. So
Right.
they were in my storeroom. They actually weren't mine. They were my parents and my aunts, and they were like in pristine condition. And
Okay. We have another great comment here from R. Myers. Talks about you can take pictures of photos on your computer or smartphone and then store them in the cloud. Be selective of that, but that's a great way to. And I thought you mentioned that about digitizing those photos
we did.
I think that was a very good point there as well.
The pictures are the most difficult thing to do.
Sure.
I would
Sure.
tell you that. Slides are even more harder. I have not digitized a lot of my slides, photos mostly, but I tell you, all the videos, the VHS videos or Super 8 videos, I've done that. And that has been the most inspirational item to see myself growing up when I was 4 or 5 years old, when my dad took movies about everything. And now you can see it much easier. And I don't know how many people have Super 8 projectors. They're still around, very difficult, but I don't have one anymore. Ours died many years ago, and it was impossible to fix. So luckily we had the videos. We took it to a company, they loaded it. It was very inexpensive too. I thought it was wonderful.
Right. Well, and that's the thing here, with ARP, we want to bring to our membership and let folks know that there are some tips that you can do to really, downsize and kind of declutter. Because again, once you downsize and declutter items, it does it for you mentally as well too. There's some mental clarity with that as well. So Gary, would you mind just sharing with folks, what are some other things that you find to be so useful when you're clearing the deck, you know what I mean? Or that sense of how do you feel, when you do clean up that closet or something along those lines. And you want to share that with us, please, if you don't mind?
As I emphasized to you, I love legacies, and I have 3 kids and 7 grandkids. And what I've been doing lately, the past several months and even year, is jotting down those stories and attaching it. I attach the stories to the items. And a lot of times I tell my sons and my daughter, here's an item that I want you, and here's why. And they accept it probably better than if I didn't. Now, I've had a few say, really, Dad, do I really need to keep this? And, and then you think about it, well, maybe it wasn't that remarkable, but it was remarkable to me back then. So I would say doing those legacies now puts a smile on your face, and you could see their attitude. I can't wait till my grandkids getting older, and they're going to appreciate some of the things that my wife and I are going to bestow upon them, and not wait until we pass away and they get the particular heirloom from my wife and I, and they're going to say, oh, that was great, a grandpa giving us this. But I wish I could have seen that expression on their faces as well.
I'm pretty sure we could just continue and go on for another 2 hours. But Gary, we are at a stopping point here. And I just want to, there's wonderful messages here in the chat saying very informative. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and hope that everyone can join us for future events. But we want to thank everyone. But if there's one thing that you could do for us is take a look at in the chat, and I'm going to email it to you. So when you get something from T. Broussard at AARP.org, don't let it go in your junk file. Okay, please make sure that you fill out that survey, give us some feedback, because we want to make these better for everyone and make sure that it's fun and fulfilling. So I give the last word to Gary. Gary, go right ahead.
Gary can talk forever. Remember, guys, I'm a radio show host. I give lots of presentation, and Troy knows that. Now, one more thing, be sure to look at the resources. These links to resources provide some excellent. I'm telling you, these AARP associates and corporate people and experts out there have done a great research on the rest of the story. Today, we've given you a snippet. This could last for 4 hours, the story said. We can go into great detail about particular items. But I'm telling you, these resources will help you. and making some of those decisions. And while I was mentioning about collectibles, they have a whole section about collectibles and about the top 10 things that you should look for, common things that are collectibles that could be worth something now, but a lot in the future. So there are many of those particular items. I mean, for example, Star Wars figures, each sold separately. Do you remember those? If you kept them and you kept the carton that they came in, they're worth about 50 times more than they are today. So some things you might have, God rest my mother's soul, she saved a lot of those particular packages and I gave them to my kids. But luckily, sadly, not luckily, my kids tore up all the boxes, but we had all the boxes of some of those particular items. So in my passing, I do thank you everyone for participating today. Hope you glean something out of this and hope you'll start that decluttering in a small way and that downsizing in a small way, but take that first step. That's important. Take that first step. Thank you a lot.